the Genealogy Guy podcast, demystifying technology and exploring family tree research. Please remember to subscribe and share the podcast with family and friends.
And once again, welcome to another episode of Armchair Genealogy with me, the Genealogy Guy, with tech support from Broadcast Media UK. As always, if you enjoy this episode, remember you can find all past episodes of Armchair Genealogy at armchairgenealogy.com. I'm now speaking to Cyndi Ingle, a genealogist, writer, and a person behind the award-winning Cyndis list. So, Cyndi, to start us off, in the style of a short elevator pitch, how would you describe Cyndi's list?
Well, it's a categorized and cross-referenced list of links for everything that I can find online for genealogical research.
So before we start chatting about Cyndi's list, when did you first get into doing your own personal genealogy?
I started in high school. It was 44 years ago now. I had a class project, and it was a social studies class, and I think the purpose of the assignment was to try to figure out, how diverse was your ethnicity. I was very interested in it, and it kind of had me hooked from that point forward. That same year, my aunt had gone back and visited a bunch of cousins on the East Coast and came home with a whole stack full of family group sheets and pedigree charts and things prior to computers, obviously, and brought them home and shared them with me. And from that point forward, I was hooked entirely. What
made you to decide to actually set up Cyndi's list? What was the driving force behind it?
In the summer of 95, I got a new computer, and it came with AOL software preloaded and a 9600 baud modem. It was screaming fast. I went online for the first time, and I went through AOL because it came loaded with it. And there was this internet thing that you could leave AOL and go out and look at it and find things. And I wondered what I could find for genealogy. I was curious. Up to that point, I probably was a genealogist in a vacuum. I live in Washington State, up in the upper left corner of the United States. And all of my people came from back in the Midwest and the East Coast. And so going anywhere to do any research was hard. So the internet having things available for me was really kind of cool and interesting. And so that summer, I spent my whole time doing that. And then in the fall, we get back together at our local genealogical society and have a meeting. And we had like a share and tell sort of thing. What did you do over the summer? And so I took a sheet, a whole page of all the bookmarks I could find for everything I could find online for genealogy. The quarterly editor came up to me afterwards because everybody at the meeting was very excited about it. They all wanted a copy. I had to go upstairs and make more copies. I think I made 20 copies of that thing. The quarterly editor came up and said, "Hey, do you think you could expand that, turn it into an article for the quarterly?" And I thought, yeah, how many pages? She said 5 or 6 pages. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to categorize them if it's going to be that long. So it started off as an article where I categorized everything I could look for, and I found more to fill out this 5 to 6 page article. That was in the September of 95. And then in January of the following year, I taught myself HTML and made a really rudimentary, ugly looking website.
As we all did.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny when I see copies of it now, it looks very 1995. When I taught myself how to do all that, and then it was a personal site, and I thought I'll do my genealogy, I'll publish my genealogy, I'll meet cousins, and that was kind of the purpose, right? And then I had this list of links, and I thought, well, maybe somebody else would find this useful. If my society liked it, it was a stupid name that I gave it, Cyndi's List of Genealogical Sites on the Internet. I put it like a little side project there. Everything was very collaborative early on the internet, and I got people immediately, oh, we'll link to my site, I'll link to yours, and vice versa, and back and forth. And it was officially online March 4th of 1996. And it started becoming like a snowball heading downhill. It just grew and grew and grew. So that by the end of the year, I started off with 1,000 links on one web page. By the end of the year, I was splitting it up into separate web pages. And I don't even remember how quick it grew, 12,000 at the end of the year, and so on and so forth. Today, there's over 320, almost 330,000 links.
Wow.
Over 250. I've lost track of counting the categories.
So with search engines like Google and Bing, you must get asked an awful lot by people just going, so why do you need Cyndi's list? Now, I love the way you explain why you need to have Cyndi's list and not rely on just a search engine.
It kind of even amazes me still today that there's a need for it and a desire for it. First of all, straight up, if most people, I have had people say, oh, I used to use it. I don't use it anymore. I just use Google. And so I say to them, Okay. So if you don't know something exists in the first place, how do you know to Google for it? And there's usually a pause. Oh, the whole point here is that I've been doing genealogy for 44 years and I've been doing this for 28 years. And I'm really good at finding stuff online. And a lot of what I do a lecture called The Hidden Web, and we talk about that. A lot of what we need for genealogical research is hidden behind search engines. It's hidden behind databases. It's hidden behind membership walls or subscription walls or library catalogs. So it's not Googleable. It's not going to come to the top of the Google hits, or it's buried so far deep within a university library special manuscript collection, and you've got to dig around. Sometimes it's hard for me to find some of these things. I'll dig around in university library and archive websites forever and locate, the personal diaries of some doctors in an area or obituaries or just a variety of things that, again, if you didn't know to go looking for them or where to go looking for them, how would you know to go Google what it is you need? Straight up looking for death certificates or looking for birth registration certificates or looking for cemeteries and things. Some of that can be done that way, but not everything, because not everything is Googleable is what it comes down to. We still have to use our human brain to try to think, well, if you're doing good research, you're thinking, what is my research plan? What is my focused research question? Today, I'm trying to figure out, what unit in the military great granddad served in. And you're going to go looking. Well, where do you go find that? Where do you find those answers? A genealogist thinks through all of that, thinks through what kinds of repositories would have those records today. Where did those records originate originally? Where would they be if they're still at a governmental office? And where would they be archived, et cetera? And that's not stuff that's easily Googleable without multi-step research planning. And that's where Cyndi's list comes in. I mean, I go in and I find the things that I know we need, and I try to put them in categories that make sense for everybody and cross-reference them in as many places as possible. So the whole point then was we didn't have great search engines. And the whole point today is pretty much still the same. You've got a human being that's curating links for you that she knows you need that aren't going to be easily Googleable.
It's quite interesting because I remember back in the days when Yahoo was king, and that was being done and curated by people that specialised in particular areas. And what people don't realise now is Google is just working on what are the most popular sites that people go to. And it doesn't always mean they are the best sites. It just means they're popular sites because they get listed the most.
That's right. So we have a Facebook group, the Genealogy Squad, which is a global genealogy group, and we're focused on quality research methodology. And you'll get people ask that question all the time, and there or any other Facebook group, really, which one should I subscribe to? And the answer is the one that has what you need. And they kind of look confused when you answer it that way, but you need to figure out, where do your ancestors live? Where, in what areas? And so, you might find things that you need at all four of the major places: Ancestry, Find My Past, My Heritage, Family Search. I would always send people to Family Search first because it's free, and then go, beyond that. But there's going to be certain websites that are going to help you greatly for one line of your family, and they do nothing for another line of your family, et cetera. The whole point here is to try to I spend a lot of time trying to highlight, again, libraries and archives and genealogical and family history societies, historical societies, because they're the ones out there preserving the records that we need and doing digitization projects to put these things online. And so I really try to focus on a lot of that stuff. There's so much we can do without having to first subscribe to something else.
Absolutely. The family history groups, without them, the internet we'd just be bored.
Where did they think all these commercial entities got this stuff to begin with? It was all the volunteer efforts of genealogical societies, family history societies around the world that started doing these kinds of things way back.
The first one that was set up was because of the members of the Tacoma Pierce County Genealogical Society.
Yeah, Tacoma Pierce County.
Yeah.
Yes, I was on the board and I was a member of that, and so went to the meeting, and like I said, I had that one sheet of paper that I shared, and they asked me to do the article. And it was not ever anything that I thought would become what it is today. It's more than a full-time job. And I've been very fortunate that it turned out to be something I could turn into an occupation. So I could work from home. I've got a son that I raised at home, that sort of thing. So it was wonderful that it started meant to be helpful to everyone. And it turned into something that was then helpful for me too.
So do you have a team, or is there people around you that are also supporting you, and how many roughly?
I just kicked the team out of my office when we started this interview. My two Boston Terriers that sleep under my desk. That's pretty much it. It's me. It's just me.
Wow, that's incredible.
I've had some volunteers through the years that have helped here and there, and had somebody that was employed for a few years way back at the beginning. But no, it's just me.
Trying to get my head around that, because that would take so much commitment to be able to be focused on helping other people. You've done a stunning job over the years.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you. Yeah. I'm it's either amazing or I'm insane. I'm not sure which.
Everybody that studies genealogy ends up going crazy. We all know that. So
Yeah.
And just a short break from chatting with Cyndi Ingle from the stunning work she does on CyndislIst.com. And I just wanted to ask two things before we continue. One, if you enjoy the podcasts, then please do subscribe to know when new episodes are published, and please do share with family and friends if they too are also interested in any form of genealogy. The second thing I wanted to ask is do drop an email to info@armchairgenealogy.com if you want to suggest either future topics to explore in future episodes, or if you want to suggest someone that we should speak to and hear their genealogical tips. And now back to Cyndi Ingle chatting about her work on CyndislIst.com and her own passions when it comes to genealogy research. What are your passions when it comes to genealogy? What is it that you like to find out, the sort of the nitty-gritty part of it? Because we all go through the just wanting the names and numbers and dates.
I can remember going to a lecture at the Tacoma Pierce County group by a local genealogist who did a column, and she was talking about putting flesh on the bones. And, in other words, we could just do dry genealogy, names, dates, and places, but that's not interesting. These are people. These were people that had lives and had sadnesses and happinesses and all sorts of things in their lives that made them who they were. And so really kind of digging and trying to figure out who they were, in addition to just when and where they were, I think is really important. Right now, we've got in the United States a lot of people who, and maybe it's in the UK too. When someone says, what did your ancestor do? Who were they? Oh, they were just farmers. Like just farmers meant they didn't have lives, or they didn't have anything important going on that made them who they were. And so my partner in crime, Carrie Taplin, and I, and Paula Stewart Warren are putting this together. And Carrie's idea was originally, it was her idea that we do a profile on our farming ancestor and try to draw a story of their life and what it would have been like. So we're looking at things like I've got a whole lecture that I'm working on today that's all about the education, agricultural education, and what they had to learn. I finished working on one last night that was about how they went to market and the kinds of things that drove them to decide where they might purchase land and where they might farm and what kinds of products they had, what kind of farmer they were they successful, were they not? So really digging into social history and local history, but also what was the science of the time that led them to start to grow a certain crop and be successful or not successful. For me, my ancestry, my Nash line, and a couple other lines are from England, but early on, very early on in the 1600s, coming over into Connecticut. And then my personal direct line is the one that kept going west, Connecticut to New York, into Wisconsin, into Minnesota, into the Dakotas, and finally hitting Washington State and California. And we hit the ocean. We couldn't go any further west. What drove my personal family lines to leave the family behind and keep going and try to make a better life? What was their life like? And I've learned a lot and this is the other passion of mine is genealogical education. I think that none of us can move forward in our research unless we're actively getting education we need to learn how to do better or do more with it. And so in this, as I'm writing these lectures and trying to help others find this kind of information, I'm looking for examples from my own family and actually learning more about my own family in the process of preparing to teach others. I hadn't really thought about it before, but my grandpa, my dad's father, came from North Dakota. His parents went to North Dakota to homestead. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's flat. It's ugly. It's a hard life. And they went there because they got free land. So that was my great grandparents. But yeah, my great grandfather didn't seem to farm once he got the land and got there. And then I started thinking about it and realizing my grandpa was not a farmer. They came from farming people, but when opportunities arose, and in this case, with both my great grandfather and his dad, my second great grandfather, and even my grandpa, they all worked on the railroad at different times. When the railroad started coming through and they could find work and what have you, they went for that. That was better money and it was hard backbreaking work, but they did that more than the farming. I learned a little bit about people that I thought I already knew well enough as I was preparing this. And I think that's very telling of that there's a lot more that you can learn if you start looking into where they lived, when they lived, what was happening around them, what were the things driving their decisions, etc. My grandpa Ingle deciding to leave North Dakota and come to Washington State during the Depression because he was looking for work. I'm grateful every day that he brought the family out this way. So it's all of that. It's putting their lives in context and making them real live people with dreams and hopes and that kind of thing. Putting the flesh on the bones.
What I always find fascinating myself is you realise how little you know about just general history. As soon as you look at a time period, you realise you don't know enough about the history of that time period. So you have to go away and research, as you say, to find out why they moved. Was there something going on? Was there a war? Was there a change in circumstances? Was it a financial crash? Whatever it was, it would have caused a knock-on effect. And that part, it just always constantly reminds me, you don't know as much as you think, do you?
Exactly. We are family historians, but we are historians as well. Because they didn't just, they weren't just born and then got married and then had kids and died. They had lives, just like you and I do today, Mel, and the stuff that we struggle with, they struggled with, just for their time period and their place, whether it was during, periods of, like the Great Depression or during wars or during some of these other events that happened. And so, because like one of my lectures for next week is about disasters and how they pivoted from the Dust Bowl, how they pivoted from, tornadoes and hurricanes and the plague and locusts. I was studying locusts, Mel. And it was fascinating, some of the things I was reading, but like going back in the newspapers, old newspapers, and reading accounts of what was going on right then, and realizing these are real life people. This is affecting them.
Yeah, I was talking to Brad Argent from Ancestry, and he's really pushing on the fact of how much information is just in local newspapers to find out what's going on with families, what was going on in the area, who was buying what land. It's a fantastic different angle.
Because sometimes we get stuck on one of our people. There's a brick wall and we can't get past it. We find no records. We don't know what happened to him. When you start studying the history of the area and the time in which they lived, and you see what other people were doing in there, and they're all deciding, you know what, we're leaving. We're having a hard time making it financially. Have you heard there's some good land out in Oregon? Or have you heard there's like we're all going to head to wherever it happens to be? And they go. So if you follow, because people didn't do these things in a vacuum. They went with neighbors, they went with siblings and family groups and cousins. And I've got several instances of that where I see that the cousins all went as a group. It wasn't just my great grandfather going off into the great beyond. It was him and a whole bunch of other people that went at the same time. And so that's the other thing, is that when you're stuck on your guy, look at the people around them. This is referred to generally as the fan club, the friends, associates, and neighbors. Sometimes people call this cluster genealogy. But looking at the activities of all the people in the village, or the activities of all the people in that place and time, and see what were they doing, it's very likely your guy was doing that too.
One of my personal passions is I'm constantly telling people to record the oldest people that they can find in their families that are still alive, and just record them when they just start reminiscing, because they'll mention it and it'll be years later and you'll think, oh yes, they mentioned something about that, but you won't remember any details. But if you've got a recording with a mobile phone, it's just so easy now.
My mom lives with me now, and she's 83. She's getting up there, but every once in a while she'll start telling me something, and so I'll just turn my phone recording on. I haven't even asked her. I probably should ask her. But every once in a while she'll say, talk about something. Like when the 1950 U.S. Census came out, I showed her the page that she was on. And she started telling me, when I started naming off neighbors, she started telling me all these stories. So I just hit record to try to remember some of the things that she was saying, because it was some stuff I knew and some stuff I hadn't heard. I also I miss my uncle so much, but every time my uncle was over for Christmas dinner, I got out this picture that was of his grandparents and his mother as a child in the homestead there in North Dakota. And I get it out and set it on the table. And he would just start talking. I'd show it to him. He goes, "Oh, that's my grandparents' house." Like, yeah, I know. And then he would tell me something, and it would be a slightly different story every time. Like one summer when he did this or what have you. So get out the photos, get out the recording equipment, and do that. That's so important.
You're absolutely right, because people sort of say, well, when you start, some people feel very awkward if you start interviewing them. So you do
Yes,
exactly the right thing. You pull out a picture or an artifact, something that's like been in the
yes,
family for a long time, and you just say, what's the history with this? Or who are these people? What day was this? What were you celebrating? And it gives
yep.
them a leeway to just start talking.
I miss being able to talk to him. And I've got a lot of questions now too. The questions keep coming as you go.
Absolutely. They become more when you realize what you should have asked. You go, oh, why didn't I ask that at the time?
The older we get, the more we come up with those things. That's for sure.
So what plans, have you got any plans for the Cyndi's list? Is there any developments that you're thinking, oh, or you're just going to try and keep it growing?
I am the coyote and it is the road runner. It constantly is dropping an anvil on my head and laughing at me. It's a lot of work. I'm behind on some of my requests right at the moment because I took on a new job last September. I'm the executive genealogical and historical research, or genealogy and historical research, IGHR. Our courses are at the end of July, and I'm teaching in another institute at the end of June. So my focus for the last month or two has been really on education and all of that. So I'm a little behind on some of my requests. Um, I'm just plugging away. I keep going. I keep getting ideas. Well, for example, this farming topic led me to create a farming category on Cyndi's list. And so I've got a ton of stuff that I want to add in that category. And it's for anything having to do with farming anywhere in the world. And so like that's an example. And I'll attend a lecture that somebody's giving, a webinar, whatever it is, and they'll mention something and I'll go off and add the links to that. There's not enough time in the day. I wish I could do nothing but Cyndi's list, but I also wish I could do nothing but genealogical education because I love all of it. And I think it's important. So I'm just going to keep going as much as I can. I probably need to move it onto it. It hasn't been redesigned in a while. It's probably something I'm going to have to eventually move on to WordPress, but I don't personally have the technical capabilities to do that. So I got to figure out how to do that sometime in the next year or so. That's about it. Just keep going.
I can recommend WordPress. It is good, but it is time consuming to get your head around it. But once you've set up the basic mainframe, it's quite a good system, and it's quite easy to actually get in and edit pages. So, like yourself,
Yeah.
I've built web pages over the years, and whatever subject you're doing it on, you end up finding all these other subjects that you then go, I need a category for this. I can't just do a whole list of links. So you keep
Yeah.
creating categories. I was doing ones on folklore, English folklore, and you just spend ages finding all these folklore stories, then going, right, so this needs to be an area. It can't just be UK. You need to actually break it into areas. So you
Yeah.
another subcategory. So it just goes
Oh,
up.
you just named the last 28 years of my life. Every time I come up with something and then decide it needs to be broken into new topics. I've got a lot of occupational topics, for example, and categories for different occupations. And every time I turn around, there's something else that maybe I want to focus on. A category I started for Anglican Church because I've started sorting out all the different religions. And over here, it's Episcopalian. So we've got Church of England, Anglican Church, Episcopalian, sort of all together in a category because they're all related to one another. But I'm working on that right now.
Well, all I can say is please do continue, because I can highly recommend to anybody that's either been doing it for years but never come across your site, or just starting. It's just a fantastic place just to start getting your head around how varied the subjects are.
I would emphasize on that as you say that. Don't use the search engine on Cyndi's list. Because again, if you don't know what to search for, you don't know what to search for. Instead, browse. The whole point is browse the categories. I think this is important in most websites we go to for our research, but browse the categories page and look to see what kinds of, how have I broken it down is by record type, by locality, by ethnicity, by occupation, by religion, et cetera, et cetera. So go looking to see, is there something that covers the area or the topic you're working on, and then browse. That's the whole point of what I do.
That's a very good tip. Thank you very much, Cyndi. So Cyndislist.com.
It is free. Did we mention that? It is free.
I know it's and that's what makes it even more studied. It's like it's free and it's so big. And it's been put together by somebody that's into genealogy. It's not an algorithm. Well, I'll leave you to get on with, because your day's just starting, mine's just finishing. So I'll leave you to crack on with the day and try and catch up with your backlog that you've already mentioned.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me today.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I always enjoy talking to people that work within genealogy, because they've all got fantastic stories and bits of information and just different ways of looking at things. So, and a very huge thank you there to Cyndi Ingle for taking some time out to chat about her highly rated Cyndislist.com. A real must-see if you're into any form of family history and genealogical research. Until the next episode, happy and productive research.
And remember to subscribe to the podcast to be informed when new editions are published.